All right, open up to Joshua chapter 2. Joshua chapter 2. You remember what the S word is for chapter 2 as we went through it in the introduction to Joshua? The first chapter was support. Second chapter is what? Spies. Spies. Yes. We're going to be dealing with spies again, something that Joshua was very familiar with as a spy 40 years earlier. Throughout Europe, in occupied countries, and those that collaborated with Nazi Germany, people witnessed the persecution and murder of Jews. Some people spoke out or attempted to help the Jews. Others helped the Nazi regime carry out its murderous activities. Between these two extremes were a range of responses. Some people did nothing in response to what they saw because they feared punishment for interfering or were preoccupied with their own wartime difficulties. Doing nothing could also indicate tacit approval of the persecution and killing of certain groups. Some people used the opportunities opened up by the war for revenge or personal gain. For instance, some people stole from the homes of victims, and many informed on their neighbors or colleagues for actions forbidden by the Germans, such as hiding Jews. This is an excerpt from a website that recounts stories of people who were a part of the events of World War II. Many stories are from people who befriended Jewish people and the fear they felt for doing so. They risked their lives to help this vulnerable group of people. This isn't the first time in history that someone has helped to hide Jewish people. Can you think of a time in history when somebody else helped to hide Jewish people?
When there were people in the Bible that didn't like Jews.
That's right. There were a lot of people that did not like Jews. There's an opportunity in Joshua chapter 2 when Joshua sends out some spies to go see Jericho. And we're going to read an account of a woman who helped these spies. Today as we go through Joshua chapter 2, God wants you to see the faith and courage of Rahab. Rahab. We're going to see this in three ways. The first way we're going to see this as we go through chapter 2, verses 1 through 7, we're going to see it in Rahab's protection. Rahab's protection, verses 1 through 7. Second way, we see her faith and courage, verses 8 through 14, in Rahab's proclamation. In Rahab's proclamation. And finally, the third way, we see her faith and courage, verses 15 through 24, in Rahab's pledge. And Rahab's pledge. Let's read verses 1 through 7. We're going to take this apart one piece at a time, verses 1 through 7. Rahab's protection. Let's read the text, verses 1 through 7. Now Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out 2 men from Acacia Grove to spy secretly, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." So they went and came to the house of a harlot named Rahab and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, "Behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country." So the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the country." Then the woman took the 2 men and hid them. So she said, "Yes, the 2 men came to me, but I did not know where they came from. And it happened as the gate was being shut, when it was dark, that the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. Then the men pursued them by the road of the Jordan to the fords. As soon as those who pursued them have gone out, they shut the gate. So as we begin reading this, verses 1 through 7, we bump across this lady named Rahab. Now Rahab is a very fascinating character in all of the Bible. We don't know a ton about her. We just have a few golden nuggets of truth and information about who she was. First of all, as we read this in verse number 1, she's called a harlot. Now that's probably not the most endearing term to be used of a woman. Harlot is another name for a prostitute. Rahab was a prostitute. Now, as you think about people that are going to be helping God's people, obviously prostitutes will never help God's people. God could never use a prostitute in his program. God could never use somebody so far off the beaten path that they're unusable by God in his program. So clearly Rahab is way off the deep end, isn't she? Sometimes we feel like in our lives we're so far off the path that God could never use us again. We've done something so terrible, so horrible, so rotten and so wicked that God could never love us, God could never forgive us, God could never use us. We're so unuseful to God in his program. We give up on life, we give up on ministry, we give up on people, we give up on ourselves. And I hope that as we read this, and we bump into this woman named Rahab, who was a harlot, that God is able to use even this harlot in his program to serve his purposes. So don't believe that in your life you're ever too far gone for God to use you. We also know that she lived in the walls of Jericho. Now, back in these days, they had these cities that were surrounded by walls, and these walls were really, really thick. So thick, in fact, that you could build dwellings in them. In fact, as we read in chapter 5 of Daniel, if you'll remember that, they had walls so thick around Babylon that you could race chariots at least 2 abreast around the walls. These were big, thick walls, and people actually could live in them. And Rahab did. She lived in the walls of Jericho. We also know that in spite of all of her bad actions, bad qualities, in fact, she lived in a condemned city. As we continue on, as we read in Joshua, to let the cat out of the bag a little bit, she lived in a town called Jericho. And by the time we get to Joshua chapter 6, they're going to start to besiege and conquer Jericho. And that's where she lived. It was a condemned city. God said that we were going to take it. She lived in that condemned city. She had a bad profession. As we read this first 7 verses, she also did something else that was not very becoming of somebody who claims to be God's people. She lied. She lied. Terrible, terrible. What we also know about her is that she ended up marrying into a Jewish family, the family of Nashon. His sister, Nashon's sister, was Elisheba. I can't never say any of these names right. And this lady, Elisheba, she was married to Aaron. Now, does anybody remember who Aaron was? The brother of Moses. Rahab is married into basically the family of Moses. And by salmon, not the fish. Not the fish. There was a guy named Salmon. By salmon, Rahab became the mother of Boaz. And Boaz, through his line, begat David. And obviously we know that through the line of David, Jesus is born, which makes Rahab Jesus's, let's count the greats here if you will with me, great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. Rahab, the harlot, who lived in a condemned city, is the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of Jesus. Can God use somebody like that in his program? Absolutely. And if God can use somebody like that in his program, he can use you in his program. So this is Rahab. This is the background. This is what you have to understand. This is who we're talking about here. This is the central character of this chapter. You have to have in your mind who Rahab is. So Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 spies into the land of Jericho. Now remember, they are on the eastern side of the Jordan River, and now he's looking out across the Jordan River. Where are we going to go? God wants him to go to Jericho, apparently. So he's going to send some spies out because he's going to try to figure out what's going on in the land. So why would he send out spies? Well, Joshua wanted some information and reconnaissance. It's always a great idea to get a lay of the land and see what's going on here. He wants to know if there's any gates. Are there fortifications? Are there towers? What's the military force look like? What kind of morale is at stake in the town of Jericho? There's a lot of things that he can learn by sending out spies. So he sends out these spies, something he himself is very familiar with. 40 years earlier, him and Caleb and 10 others were sent out as spies to look at the promised land. So he kind of knows a little bit about what they're going to find, but he sends them out, and they came to the house of a harlot named Rahab, and was told the king of Jericho, saying, "Behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country." How did he know that? Eleanor, you were asking me earlier, how do some of these people know some of this stuff?
Well, and who told the king?
And who told the king? How did Rahab know? How did the king know? Facebook. It's all on Facebook. You cannot hide anything on Facebook. It will haunt you. Don't post if you don't want people to find out about it, okay? It will haunt you the rest of your life. And here it is in Joshua 2, haunting them to this day. All right, it lasts forever. No, I don't think it was Facebook. It was probably telephone. Hello. No, it wasn't that either? Well, I don't know then how they knew. If it wasn't Facebook or telephone, I don't know how they knew. Somehow they knew, though. Somehow the information got to Rahab. Somehow the information got to the king of Jericho. He knew that there were spies. He knew that, in fact, that they, not only were there spies, he knew that they'd gone to Rahab. You know, people talk. Did you know that?
Yeah.
People talk, especially young girls. Right? People talk. They love to share information. They love to be able to tell people things. I don't know. It's just a thing that we have inside of us. I don't know if it's like a gossip thing. I don't know what it is, but we love sharing stuff with people. And so somehow the king knew that they were with Rahab. And so the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men who've come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the country." He knows something's going down. Maybe he can't quite put his finger on it, but he knows there's something going on here. But he just can't figure it out. So he wants Rahab to come and to tell him what's going on. So the woman took the two men and hid them. Precursor to stuff in World War II. And she said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I do not know where they're from. I don't know where they're from. Maybe they are Jews. I don't know." Well, that's interesting because they look very different from everybody else. I mean, you can tell who's it. Even to this day, you can look at somebody and kind of almost tell if they're Jewish or not. I mean, hello, how did she not know? Big, bold-faced lie there. Of course she knew who they were. But, I don't know. I don't know where they came from. And it happened at the gate was being shut when it was dark that the men went out. Where the men went, I don't know. But if you go, you might be able to go get them, so go quick. Good liars are good distractors. You ever notice that? So she tells them this story. And she provides protection to them. Now, we can argue the morality of what she did as a profession. We can argue the morality of whether or not she should have lied. We can argue that all day long. But what I do know is that she did protect them. They were protected. The king did not find them. The king did not take them. The king did not kill them. She did protect them. In her own way, she was able to protect them. She knew that they were very important people. As God's people, Israel, they were very important people, and she was willing to cut some corners, as it were, to protect them, to keep them safe. We see her faith and her courage to lie to the king, to keep them safe, because she knew, as the children of Israel, they were special, and they were important, and they needed protecting. And she was the one for the job to protect them. And she was willing to do that. Did you know, by the way, in these days, if you lied to the king or if you did something to the king that he didn't like, do you know what he could do to you instantly? He could kill you instantly, right where you stood. You wouldn't have even seen it coming. Dead. What faith and courage to stand before the king to protect these two spies that had been sent out. And in verses 8 through 14, we see her proclamation. Now, before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land. So she said earlier to the king that this happened and go take them over. Now we're going to get a little bit of a backstory. When she laid them down, what did she tell them? I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now, therefore, I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you will also show kindness to my father's house and give me a true token, and spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. So the men answered to her, our lives for yours, if none of you tell this business of ours, and it shall be when the Lord has given us the land that we will deal kindly and truly with you. We see her proclamation. She is telling them how she perceives them, the information that she's gathered in from various sources. Somehow, this information of this war with these two kings has made its way out. I already know it's not by Facebook, but somehow it's already gone out. And the people of Jericho have heard what has happened, how the nation of Israel has gone to war. They have won in battle. They're doing the things that they need to do. And she says, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and terror has fallen on us, and the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted. And she goes on to continue to say how they're faint-hearted. They cannot stand up. Their morale is so low. I bet if Joshua and his army come in, they'd wipe them out easily. This is information that Joshua wanted to know. This is information that is very valuable to Joshua as he's trying to take this promised land, as he's going into this land. This is why he sent these spies out. She says, for we've heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea when you came out of Egypt. You know, that was a long time ago. 40 plus years have passed. Because remember, as they came out in Exodus 15, Exodus 16, they start doing their tour of the land there after the parting of the Red Sea. Then they try to get in, and they have 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. That was 40-some years ago. I don't know how old Rahab is here, but if she's not 40, she wouldn't have even been alive for this. And yet, the stories of how God has worked in the hearts and lives of this nation Israel, this information is far and wide into all the countryside. The things that God is able to do for his people are far and wide and well known. And if you're on the wrong side of what God is doing, you can become very faint-hearted and very weak, and things can be very tough for you, and you may not want to move forward. And she says, as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither was any more courage in us anymore because of you. For the Lord our God, he's the God of heaven above, the earth beneath. I don't think she was as faint-hearted as everybody else in Jericho. I think she had more courage than everybody else in Jericho. She had the audacity to stand up for these people. As we continue on in Joshua chapter 6 and we see the destruction that befalls Jericho, there isn't anybody else that's left alive. It's just her dwelling, her family, her house, and that's it. I wonder if there was a couple of more people living in Jericho that had this kind of courage and faith that Rahab had, would God have spared them as well? I bet he would have. I bet he would have. But nobody else was spared. Every other person perished at the taking of Jericho in Joshua chapter 6, except for the house of Rahab. She was the only one. It goes to show that you have a decision to make in your life. when you see the working of God in the hearts and lives of people, and you know that He's out there doing His thing, doing things that only He can do, you have a choice to make in your life how you're going to receive that information. You can either receive it as the inhabitants of Jericho and just become faint-hearted and woe is me and fatalistic and God's just, oh boy, we can't handle this. Or you can be like Rahab and understand that the Lord is God in heaven and on earth, and He will do His will on this earth as He sees fit, and you can submit to Him and have faith in Him, and He can rescue you and deliver you from anything that befalls, even the city of Jericho. How is it that you're going to choose to live? Joshua later in chapter 24 is going to say, choose this day whom you will serve. Some of me wonders, is he looking back upon Rahab and the choice that she made? She had to choose who she was going to serve. Was she going to serve the king of Jericho and say, yep, go get him. I don't know who these cats are. Get him out of here. But that's not what she chose to do. She chose to serve the Lord by protecting His spies. She gives this proclamation of how everybody else feels, but she herself did not feel that way. She made that choice. What choice are you making in your life about who God is, what He's done, what He's accomplished, not just in your life, but in the lives of people you love? What has He done? And you can go back 40 years and see all kinds of things that God has done. Just like Rahab had to go back 40 years in the past from her life, from her time, to the parting of the Red Sea and say, you know what, I know God did that. What are the events in your life as you look back over the course of time, can you say, God did that? And that God I will serve in spite of everybody else around me in this city. I will serve the God of Israel. Her proclamation is huge. And she says, now therefore I beg you, I swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you will also show kindness to my father's house and give me a true token and spare my family. She didn't have that. No, well, she didn't have that pledge when she first did this. Did she? This wasn't a tit-for-tat sort of contract here, was it? She didn't have this pledge. She didn't have this token. She didn't have this promise before she hid them. Notice she asked them for this kindness after they've already been hidden. After the king has already sent his men out, she says, since I've shown you kindness, please show me kindness. There was no guarantee. Those spies could have said, hey, thanks a lot, lady. You're a harlot anyway. We don't want nothing to do with you. They could have ratted her out just as easily. But they didn't. They were willing to show the same kindness to her that she showed to them. And it's the same kind of kindness that God is showing and willing to give to any one of us. The offer of forgiveness that Jesus offers to all of us stands just as sure and just as strong as it always has. That's Rahab's proclamation. As she protected them, she also proclaimed them. And then in verses 15 through 24, we see her pledge. Then she let them down by a rope through the window. For her house was on the city wall. She dwelt on the wall. And she said to them, get to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you. Hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned, and afterward you may go your way. So the men said to her, we will be blameless of this oath of yours, which you have made us swear, unless when we come into the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you bring out your father, your mother, your brothers, and all your families, your father's household to your own home. So it shall be that whoever goes outside the doors of your house into the streets, his blood will be on his own head, and we will be guiltless. And whoever is with you in this house, his blood shall be on our head if a hand is laid on him. And if you tell this business of ours, then we will be free from your oath, which you made us swear. Then she said, according to your words, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet cord in the window. They departed and went to the mountain and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. The pursuers sought them all along the way, but did not find them. So the 2 men returned, descended from the mountain, and crossed over, and they came to Joshua, the son of Nun, and told him all that had befallen them. And they said to Joshua, truly the Lord has delivered all the land into our hands, for indeed the inhabitants of all this country are faint-hearted because of us. So Rahab's pledge. So they make this deal, they make this pact. And the spies are to now go out into the mountains and hide for these 3 days while these pursuers are out trying to find them. But before they leave, they make a promise to Rahab, and they say this: when we come back, because we're coming back, we're going to take Jericho. We know you're faint-hearted, we understand these things, and we're going to be on our way very soon. When we come back with the army, what we need you to do is have this scarlet thread coming from your window. That would allow the army of Israel to know where Rahab was, so that when they descended upon the town and started to break down the walls, they knew which house to preserve and to keep safe. And they told her, everybody that you want to keep safe, you keep in this house, and if anybody else is anywhere else and we kill them, it's not our fault. This is what you've got to do. And she gave them the thumbs up. And so she put that scarlet rope out. You think they're going to be faithful? Do you think she's going to be faithful? What do you think is going to happen? If you haven't read the end of this, you're kind of wondering, you're kind of dangling. What's going to happen? When they cross into this place, what's going to happen? So the 2 men returned. They descended from the mountain. Now, interestingly enough, this mountain that they're by, about a half a mile west of Jericho, are these limestone cliffs about 1,500 feet high, and they're honeycombed with caves. What an ideal spot to hide for 3 days while these pursuers are looking for them. To be able to hide in any number of honeycombed caves in this mountain that's very close to Jericho. Brilliant. Brilliant. So they came down from the mountain. They went back to Joshua and they told him. I wonder how Joshua felt. He's like, yes, we're going to do this. He was probably so excited. He was probably ready to go. This is such wonderful news that he got from them. But what can we learn from this chapter? What can we learn from all of these things as we study Joshua chapter 2? We see this story. We see the harlot Rahab. We see the faith and the courage that she has to protect them, to proclaim them, and to pledge to them this scarlet thread. We can learn that the grace of God is bigger than our sin. The grace of God that was extended to the harlot Rahab was larger than her sin of harlotry. Some of us like to think that we're too far gone. I'm going to tell you again that you are not too far gone. Even you can be used in the program of God because His grace is greater than your sin. God can use any one of us to do anything He wants for His program, in spite of any of the failings that we have. Our faith is in God and what He has done, and not we ourselves are doing or have done. We oftentimes like to place the emphasis on what we can do, what we have done. And the reason that we can't do things is because we failed. We place so much emphasis on ourselves. And I'm glad Rahab didn't think that way. I'm really glad Rahab didn't think that way. Because if she'd have thought the way that we often do sometimes, she may not have hidden those spies. She allowed the grace of God to be bigger in her life than her sin. And she realized that her faith in God and who He is the appropriate place to place her faith, and not in herself or what she has done. God will accept anybody who places their faith in Him. It doesn't matter if you're a harlot. It doesn't matter what you've done in your life. We can go through everybody's closet and pull out all the skeletons if you'd like. Because I'm sure Halloween is coming up, so maybe we could do that. But we all have skeletons in the closet. And we can pull them all out and look at them. But you know what? It doesn't really matter, does it? God will accept anybody who places their faith in Him. No matter our past, no matter where we've come from, no matter the sin that follows us, no matter what happens to us, God will fulfill His promises to us. And we're going to see this as we go through chapter 6 and the taking of Jericho. When these spies promised Rahab that they're going to leave them alone, the scarlet thread, we see it. Everybody in there is going to be kept safe. The promises that they all made together were fulfilled when the city of Jericho gets taken. Just as assuredly, I say to you, the promises that God has given to you, He will fulfill and He will deliver on 100%, even if you haven't seen them delivered to you just yet. I'm telling you, they're coming. It's going to happen. When He says that you will be with Him forever, and I'm going to prepare a place for you so that where I am, you may be as well. Well, I'm not there yet, Lord. I know, just be patient. He will fulfill that promise to you. I hope and I pray that you have the same level of faith and confidence and courage in the Lord that Rahab the harlot had. And sometimes I wonder if that emphasis on the harlotry is given to us just to poke us a little harder and say, you know what? Even this harlot is seen as righteous and justified in my sight because of her faith in me. What are you letting hold you back? I'm not letting her harlotry hold her back. God speaking. What are you letting hold you back? I hope it's nothing. I hope your faith and courage in the Lord is as strong as what Rahab had, because it was amazing what she was able to do. Let's pray.